Okay, so as I was saying, I was running a Mutants and Masterminds game once a few years ago for a group of friends, and we were alternating between a D&D campaign and my Mutants and Masterminds campaign. And so it was the same group of people playing the two games, and we would just kind of switch off. Well, one of the players had had some problematic attitudes, even in the D&D game, before the Mutants and Masterminds game ever got started. But it was something that, we could deal with, and it was just, occasionally he would have his little tantrums or whatever it was, and we would move on. Well, unfortunately, it seems like it came to the forefront in the Mutants and Masterminds game, and it just got to the point where everybody's tensions had boiled over. I was running primarily a four-color, kind of bright, bright spandex, Silver Agey kind of a supers game. So the characters were supposed to be playing in that vein. They were supposed to be heroic, that sort of thing. Don't kill the villains, all that good stuff. Well, one of the players, one of the first indications I should have had that this player was going to be a problem in this campaign was that by the time we reached the 6th session, he was on his 3rd character. Not because his previous characters had died, but because he'd grown tired of them. He grew tired of the first characters, created a second one, didn't feel that character was effective or useful, so he ditched that one and created a 3rd one. His 3rd character was a 12-year-old amnesiac. Now, normally I don't have a problem with amnesia as a flaw. It's a great flaw for me as a GM, to basically an excuse to throw anything and everything, all kinds of plot twists at you to make the players and the party's lives interesting. Well, he took it as a flaw to get the extra power points. That's honestly why he took amnesia, was because it was going to give him extra points to spend on his character. Okay, that's fine. But what ended up happening was that he didn't roleplay it like a flaw. In fact, he was trying to use it as an excuse for his character to have no moral compass, so that he could do whatever he wanted to and say, well, my character doesn't know any better, so that's what I'm going to do. So he was mind-controlling people and killing people and, all this kind of stuff. And the players and the other characters in the party, they were trying to do it in character, approaching this roleplay opportunity to try and get him to change his ways, to teach him right from wrong, and get him to behave. It wasn't really working. They were getting frustrated. So what ended up happening was there was a bit of downtime at the beginning of what became the last session of the campaign, where the characters had regrouped at the headquarters, and it was time for them to decide, how to approach the next situation, and what to do with the PowerPoints that I had rewarded them that they hadn't spent. So, now, before this session, his behavior was becoming problematic, and to the point that some of the players had even emailed me and called me and said, hey, I like your game, and I think on some level it's fun and entertaining, but the attitude of this player is really ruining the experience for me, and if it continues, I would rather stop joining the game than continue to put up with his nonsense. So a couple of my players had to the wit's end, and I was right there with them. So we knew that we had to find a solution. We had to talk to this guy, because we couldn't just kick him out. That was one of the problems. We couldn't just excuse him from the group, because the place that we happened to be playing, he and another one of the players, they were roommates at the apartment we played at, and it was the only central location that all of us could gather together at. So we couldn't kick him out, because he would basically have just said, okay, well then go find some other place to play, which we didn't really have at the time. So we tried to approach it, we tried to be diplomatic, we tried to deal with it in character again at this last session, and it didn't really work. He just kind of rolled off of his back. And so, the other players were discussing what to do with their PowerPoints and what to do with their downtime, and he approached me with his character and said, okay, well, his character was kind of a psychic character, so he had, telekinesis, telepathy, mind reading, mind control, and that should have been another thing that should have clued me in that this was going to be a problem character, or rather a problem character for a problem player. he had already maxed out most of his powers, including his mind control, which meant he couldn't directly spend points to make his mind control any more effective. But that was his favorite power. So he came to me and he said, okay, well, I can improve my mind control, but I want to buy a power that basically drains a person's willpower, so it makes my mind control more effective on them. And I said, okay, well, that in the system, that's feasible enough, but I said, this was really only a period of a few hours, maybe an afternoon that they had of downtime, and I said, I don't see why your character would just suddenly, poof that power. If you want to slowly start building points into it, that's fine by me. And he said, well, that wasn't what he wanted. So he said, no, okay, well, fine, then I'll build a device that will replicate that same effect. So I said, okay, does your character have any technical skills? So he looked over his character sheet. Of course, he hadn't spent any points on any crafting or technology-based skills. So he said no. I said, well, how are you going to build the device then? And so he turned to the other members of the party and he said, oh, well, one of them is technical. They can build it for me. At which point they glowered and said, hell no, we're not going to build you this device. We've seen how abusive you are with your powers as is. We don't want to give an excuse for your powers to be more effective until we've figured out how to rein in your problems. So he got all huffy and mad about that because they wouldn't build the device for him. But they knew some NPC heroes who were also technically inclined. So he said, okay, well, I'm going to go approach them and ask them to build the device for me. And they knew of his reputation. They knew he'd been problematic. They knew he'd killed people. And if they had built such a device, it would have been on their honor, basically their responsibility. So they said, no, that's not a good idea. We don't like the idea of building a device that makes it easier for you to mind control people. So, he had just about had it at that point, because every attempt that he was making to try to get this power, I was shooting down with legitimate reasons. And so finally he got huffy and he said, okay, fine. Well, we know of an underground society of villains, and they have technical type skills. So what I'm going to do is my character is going to approach one of these villains, and he's going to ask the villain to build the device for me. And if the villain refuses to build the device, I'm going to mind control him, force him to build the device, and then wipe his memory of ever doing it. At which point, the entire table was, they had stopped, and they were looking at him having this discussion with me, and there was just silence. And, at which point, we all kind of looked at him and we said, well, if you don't realize why that is not at all heroic, then we need to have a serious discussion. At which point, the entire discussion came out of character. It was all now out of character discussion, where people finally came to him and they said, hey, you have a bad attitude, you're ruining the game for us, please stop, please try to rein in these problems. Which he just shrugged off with, oh, you're just trying to tell me how to play my character, stop telling me how to play my character, and basically the entire game dissolved from there into just about an hour of squabbling, bickering, and arguing, at which point I looked at the group and I said, okay, well, there's clearly no middle ground here. We clearly cannot come to an agreement. So rather than continue to frustrate people and risk breaking up the group in its entirety, because we were still, remember, playing the D&D game on the alternate weekends, I retired the campaign. I said, okay, this isn't working. Sorry, guys. I was having fun with it, but apparently, it's just too many problems going on, and I would rather not dissolve the entire group for the sake of this campaign. So we ended the campaign then and there, on the stubbornness of one player. So that was about the culmination of bad gaming that I've experienced. I don't think it's ever gotten any worse than that. And we all kind of shudder in horror whenever we recall. Though admittedly we have a few fun times where, between each other, remembering those moments of that bad player. And apparently, ironically enough, after that player had moved away to another city, he had joined a gaming group and had apparently started GMing and encountered a player who was very much to him as he was to us. And he sent a nice, genuine email to a couple of us saying, please forgive me for everything that I put you through, because now I can really understand it from a GM's perspective. So that was kind of cool, an interesting bit of irony, and kind of capped the whole thing off. So hopefully you guys found those stories interesting, and I will try and be back with a couple more videos for you guys before the day's out. Thanks, guys. Bye.